30 minutes of power.
Welcome to 30 Minutes of Power, a podcast dedicated to educate, encourage, and inspire godly people to use their power to empower others. Join your hosts, Jory O'Neill and Nicole Salter, as they share powerful insights on how you can use your God-given talents and gifts to make a positive impact in the world.
Welcome back to another amazing episode of 30 Minutes of Power, TOP, your one-stop shop for all things empowerment, encouraging, and inspirational. We got our host today, Nicole Salter. Let's get it. Jory.
Hey.
And our guest for today, she's one of our probably founding members. Is that what they call it?
Yes,
of 30
definitely.
Dr. Joyce Robert in the building. Let's go. What's going on, Dr.
Whoop, whoop.
Good. So good. She's shy, y'all. Don't worry. She's shy. She'll warm up in a second.
Yes.
So we're still
We'll get her out of the jail.
right. We're still doing the Moth versus Mark series, and I couldn't think of a better topic to be discussing, especially when it comes to thinking about being marked for greatness and or being marked for potential failure. And as it turns out,
Someone's at the front door.
many maternal wards across the country, being an African-American woman, you are marked when you initially walk in there. And so I want to shed some light on that and the pivotal role that Joyce is playing in making sure that the next generation of doctors are mentored properly, right? On etiquette, on procedures. And so I want to first dive in and thank you, Dr. Joyce, for being with us today. So honored to have you. She's on mute for a little bit. She's shy, but she'll warm up.
No, sorry. No. It's always a pleasure, Jory. We go way back, and I'm always happy to be here.
Appreciate it. So if you could share just off top why you believe mentorship is so important, especially in the medical field.
Well, for sure. The medical field, it's a tough field. It's a growing field. It's challenging. So I feel like, as within all aspects of life, it's just great to have someone that you can look towards, to someone to advise you, so you could be a role model. So I always feel like you'll be a mentor, right? I feel like being a mentor is important. So you always have to give back, essentially. So even for, I'm starting a new program here in Delaware. So we have 4 new residents, and they don't have any senior residents. So I am starting a mentorship program there where they can be doctors in the community, whether they're retired physicians, physicians just coming out of residency, mid-career physicians, to really help guide these young doctors, because this is something they've never done before, especially physicians of color. They may be the first one to graduate college or graduate medical school, so they may not always have a hand to hold. So I think that's very important. And I mentor a group of young females, mostly Black females, mostly, just to help them. The other day, actually, one of the girls I mentored, she texted me out of the blue, like, "Hey, you got a second? Can I talk to you?" And of course, I'm like, "Yeah, let's talk." And she had some situation that I helped her through, but it's always so great that people can, when they're in a bind, they think of me, or I can reach out to her, I can call, I can text her. So, I feel like that's pivotal. That's real important for any success in life, is to have a mentor. So especially in medicine.
I love all of that. And so if you could give a little background for those who don't know your story and why mentorship plays such a vital role in what you do and how you even got to Delaware in the first place. So you can start us back to the beginning, where everything started in Harlem.
Oh Lord, you're going way back.
Yes.
Man, so
they need to know.
So quickly, background, my story is, I was like one of those stories. I wanted to be a doctor ever since I was a kid. I think I'm probably about my son's age. He's 10. So about that time, I was like, well, I love my pediatrician. She was a Black female also, so that representation matters. And, she took care of me and, my siblings. I'm 1 out of 5. And then I wanted to do pediatrics initially. I didn't want to do peds. And then I ended up going to the school. So in high school, you know, I always wanted to, you know, go into medical school. And just by chance, one of my dad's friends was like, oh, there's this like CUNY program, you know, for those who live in New York, is like, you know, City University of New York, that they take high school students interested in medicine and they go straight through medical school. And I would not have known about this program unless it was my dad's friend. And I sort of like applied like last minute. And then I got accepted. So that kind of started my whole journey into medicine. And even within that program, it was like it was called Sophie Davis at the time. You know, we always had senior, what do you call it? You know, senior classmates tell you, all right, take this class, don't take this class, you know, study this, don't study that. So even from beginning, you always had someone, you know, above you to help you. So that really helped me within Sophie and along the way. And then I really got into more mentoring after I was done with medical school. So I was like, at least I, you know, graduated. I have something to give at that point. And then during residency, I was always the one who liked taking students. Like anytime there was a medical student, I'm like, all right, you could be on my team, because it takes a lot of patience and you got to slow things down. You got to explain things. And certain people were just like, you know what, like you can have them. So when I graduated residency, I ended up winning the teaching award because I just love to teach. And I think that's what I love seeing patients too. But I also love the part of like building the next generation of physicians and really kind of helping them explore medicine and what they like. And especially if they want to go into family medicine, just giving them the opportunity to be able to go out there and take care of patients. So I think that's why I love academic medicine, which is more teaching residents and teaching medical students. So I've done that in Harlem and in Long Island as well. And then how I got to Delaware was there was this opportunity. Sometimes I regret, I'm like, why did I take the opportunity? It's a lot of work, but God put me here. And there was opportunity to start a new residency program. So residency is the additional training that doctors get after they complete their MD or DO degree. So just starting this program straight from scratch, like building the curriculum, recruiting the first class of residents, building relationships with the hospital with different doctors to like recruit them to want them to teach the residents. So that's currently the stage I'm in. So I moved to Delaware August of 21. So this August will be 2 full years. And starting July 1st is when we'll have our first group of interns. So these are doctors who probably just graduated this week or last week. They just got their degree and they'll continue training in the field of family medicine. So it's pretty cool to really be a part of like a legacy in Delaware, to like build this program pretty much from nothing. And you know, it definitely takes a team, and I have a really great team that I work with. But, you know, I think this is something that I'll be proud of, you know, when we graduate our full class. Family medicine's 3 years. So 3 years from now, they'll graduate and they'll be out and about in the world taking care of patients in the community. So, yeah. So that's pretty much the story in a nutshell.
I have a question.
Of course.
Where did you get the confidence from to want to even begin to start not only a new program, but like a whole new life in another state?
I know.
Where did that confidence come where you're like, you know what, I got this, I'm gonna figure it out, I don't know what I'm doing, but we're gonna do it and we're gonna make it happen?
Oh man, that's a good question, Nicole. And Jory could attest, because there was a big low in my life, Jory. Don't get me all crying here, but like I didn't always have the confidence. Like Jory was there when things didn't work out in Long Island. You know the story, Jory. And I was just like, what am I gonna do? This is not working out. Because the way I wanted to see my career move in New York, like God put a stop to it. He was like, nope. And I'm like, this is where I want to be. My family was here, and the friends like Jory and everybody. So initially I didn't think I was gonna go to Delaware. When we actually went to interview over here, like Raven was like, why are we going to Delaware? First of all, I didn't know where Lewis, Delaware was. I had to look it up on Waze and Google Maps. I'm like, I think we've been here. What is it? Lose. So, it took, and it was totally God, because at that time I was like, Joyce, you were just going to use this job to leverage for what was going on in Long Island. And that was like where my heart was at that point. And then when we came down here, we were like, oh, this is like kind of nice. Definitely where Jory's been down here, definitely slower than Long Island, but still like, nice, clean, all that stuff. We have more space. And then I met the people and I was just like, wow, I think I can see myself here. And even at that point, I was still like not ready to make the change. And then my sister Julia was like, she came with me when I interviewed. She was like, you know what, Joyce, like you only live once. Just try. If you fail, you can always come back to New York. Like that's it. But what would you know if you don't try? She told me that. I was just like, but I don't know. This is like Delaware. Like, what type of move from New York to Delaware? You got to move up. Like Delaware is not a move up state. Like you got to go to Florida or North or South Carolina or Texas. Like you don't want people. You got to go to California. But who like goes from New York to Delaware? Like in my mind, it wasn't a place where I thought I can really be successful. Because it was like Delaware. But I was just like, and I'll be honest, I was like, the first state, very small state, but I realized a small state, you can actually make more of an impact than what I did in New York. So I feel like even the 2 years that I was here, I felt it definitely made way more of an impact than the time that I was in New York, honestly, because it's like a smaller scale. And then there's a big need for doctors here. It's like crazy. Like it's crazy. Like there's a lot of underserved areas in this state too. As well, as well in New York, there's like underserved. And I always wanted to work in underserved areas, like people who are looking for physicians, people are looking for high quality care. And I was able to find that here in Delaware, that there are people who've been waiting and, sick patients who need great doctors. And the residency program is one way that like I can literally train like great doctors, like literally like I'm training you to like do what you need to do. So I was just like, well, that will be my mark if anything. So that but the confidence, honestly, Nicole, wasn't there in the beginning. It was just like, I think more as when I think my confidence was at a low when things didn't work out at my previous job. And then when I saw that like I had the potential and I had the skills to do it, and I'm like, oh, like I can do it. Like God's with me. Like he let me here for a reason. Like it should be successful. And then if it doesn't work out the way I planned it, then Jory has a big enough house for me and my family.
That's right.
She can set something up in the backyard. She's a carpenter, so she can set.
That's right.
So I always know I can always go back to New York. I can always go back to home. So
we'll receive you with open arms. No problem. We'll make space. So a lot of things came to mind when you were sharing, and thank you for being that vulnerable and that open.
Thank you.
Because it's not easy, right? It's not easy to admit, like you were scared. Like that's real talk. Like that's a very difficult thing to be as open and honest about. And so it makes me think in terms of being mocked, right? And so have you ever experienced being a Black physician, a Black woman physician? Have you ever had the experience of being mocked just for who you were, regardless of your skill set as a doctor? Because clearly you skilled, like you teaching a whole like next generation of physicians. But have you ever had that experience where because you look like how you look in the medical field, that you were mocked?
Yes, I think so. Definitely like mocked in terms of like people stripping my title away, just the way that I look, or maybe the way that I speak or act. Like they may not know me when they see me. Okay, so that's not the doctor. That's not the person that I need to respect or whatever, things like that, until I may introduce myself or someone may introduce me. Then they're like, oh, okay. We get that a lot, even from, colleagues or even from patients too. Sometimes there are times where I walk in the room, they're like, I'm Dr. Robert. And then 5 minutes later, it's like, oh, when's the doctor going to come in? And you're like, well, my badge says Robert, Dr. Robert. My white coat says Dr. Robert. I said I was Dr. Robert, but from that, the bias based on like my race and my gender for sure. And it happens, happens in New York. It happens in Delaware as well. And it's always good to have allyships. In New York, there were times where we would round, that typical rounding, all the doctors go in the room, and how patients wouldn't address me as like the leader of the team. And then I would have some, white male physicians like, nope, that's the boss. Like, you got to talk with her. Don't talk to me. So those are good when you have like that allyship. Like, nope, she's actually, nope, like, don't, like that redirection. And it doesn't always have to come from me, because sometimes it's tiring, or you're just like, all right, how do I say this? You don't want to offend people. You don't want to make things awkward. And sometimes it takes like, allies to, to lift you up. So that's always a good thing.
So I'm trying to educate myself. I'm taking a course actually in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Ooh,
Yes, ooh.
excellent.
And so part of what I'm learning is that there is two forms of bias, right? There's explicit, and then there's like covert, conscious and unconscious.
Yeah.
And so from the time that you were initially in medical school, like studying, trying to go through, your education, or I don't know what these things are called, maybe your first rounds or your second rounds or whatever it's called.
Right.
What types of practices or things do you feel like have been done where now a lot of those unconscious bias that maybe even would come from some of the instructors, right? Some of the physicians who are teaching you all.
Yeah.
How has there been a shift, or has there been a shift?
I mean, sometimes there's change and sometimes there's no change. I don't know. That's a good question. I think, well, okay, I give you an example. Sometimes patients are like a roundabout way. They want to know if you like, a lot of times they'll say, did you grow up here? Where'd you grow up? Or where'd you go to school? Like, because sometimes they may think that I'm like a foreign medical, nothing's wrong for the foreign medical schools, but like, is English your first language? Just like these random questions that it's not relevant to the topic, that they try to get more information. You're like, well, my parents are from Nigeria, but I was born in New York. You kind of have to give that backstory, which has nothing to do with me being your physician, but just to sort of answer and move on. But I did have a patient in Delaware who was like, and in Delaware, they look you up. They go on your website. They know that I'm from New York. So it's like a little bit different than the practice that I had in New York. And one guy was like, well, I know I wanted a Black physician because I know that you had to work twice as hard in medical school and residence. So you must be really smart. And I was like, that's the first time I've ever heard of that. So I was like, I guess that's good. Because he was like, I know you worked in Harlem, right? Or you studied in Harlem. And I was just like, well, yeah, I did. Because I could see, looked at my bio. So I don't know if that's like being more progressive, that they see, like, he did acknowledge that, being a Black physician is harder. And then, sometimes you do have to work twice as hard or look twice as good as your other colleagues just because of the color of your skin or your gender. So I was like, thank you.
So your background, your parents being from Nigeria, but you being born and raised in New York, specifically in Long Island. What part did the community play in helping kind of give you the idea, right? As you say, you had a Black pediatrician, a Black woman pediatrician, so representation on that end. But how did the community in which you grew up in, how did they support this dream that you had to become a physician?
Yeah, I think all supportive, especially from family, friends. My parents are from Nigeria, and so typical or stereotypical Nigerian culture is like they want their kids to be the doctors and the engineers and the lawyers, like a lot of immigrant families, in general, it's like a generalization, but so I definitely had some support from my family when I was away in Harlem studying. My mom will send me money, bring me food. They'll just like they'll drive to Harlem from Long Island just to like give me like a thing of jollof rice or whatever and like bring me back. So, and I've always had that support. I remember times when I failed biochem and I was like crying to my mom, and she was like, God will put you through. Like, I still remember conversations. She would encourage me, like, you're going to do well. So that really kind of was also a big, like, family support and friends and, friends and family to like kind of pull me through the hard times.
So let's paint a picture. A young person has the desire, the dream to become a
yeah.
doctor. And for whatever reason, they make an error in judgment. Maybe they're driving too fast and they crash. And in the process of crashing, unfortunately, life is lost. I know this is like really like dark turn, but stay with me. Stay with me.
Okay.
Okay. So a young person has their head on straight. They want to be a doctor. They make improper, maybe they're texting and driving because that's more common. Young person's texting and driving, and it ends up being vehicular homicide. I know it's wild. The young person is tried. They're 16. The court is trying to figure out adults, youth, going back and forth. They finally decide, okay, we're going to try them as a youth. We're going to kind of like watch and see what they do for the next 3 years. If they stay incident free, so they give them a couple of months just because you can't kill people and then just walk away. Like, it's not right. So they go, they have some time and maybe a detention center upstate. They get out, they get their GED. What is the probability that, and this is all, again, opinion.
Right.
But having now both been on the side of going to school and having classmates who were trying to be physicians, and now on the other side as a human who is training the next generation of physicians, what is the probability that that young person, after having been convicted and detained and now on probation, basically, would be successful in enduring the same medical schooling that you did? This is, again, opinion. But I want to take it
and I have not been in that situation or know someone like personally been in that situation. I think it would take a lot of like hard work, grit, and like resilience, and probably mentorship in medicine, as with a lot of fields, is sometimes like who you know as well. So I would say I would advise that person, go to school, like, get top, whatever school you can go to, get top, really show your love for the sciences. It was really like find a mentor, someone can help you, take your MCAT, just try to like, again, do your best and try to get top scores in MCATs. In terms of background check, and that's something that you can disclose. Like, I was on the admissions for Mount Sinai, and it was nice being on the other side because they do look for I forgot the term that they used. They use a term for like students who didn't have like that straight trajectory, didn't have like people who kind of had different adversities in life. So they sort of look at that. I forgot there was like a term that was used. So there are people who've had like difficult family situations or social situations who are able to like rise and shine, but it takes a lot of hard work, dedication, and resiliency for you to be able to sort of like overcome like the barriers. And you really kind of have to have people to write you a strong letter of recommendation, because medicine is not only just you, because they look at your letters, they look at like what your professors say in college, is like the whole picture. But I don't think anything's impossible. Definitely with God, everything is possible. And even in residency, I wasn't the program director, but I know some, Black male students who've had certain misdemeanors or like random things like on their application, because you do have to disclose that. Like, and there's a application question. This is like when you're in medical school applying for residency. any misdemeanors or felonies, and they were like up front and told them, hey, this is what happened. I was like in college, I did something stupid, whatever. So like there is a chance if the program director sees that you're genuine, that you're like not gonna have any more red flags, I think you're able to like still move on. So I've known some people who've had some records, and they were able to still like continue to go into residency and
So,
become, yeah.
So my question, and I love that answer. That was a fantastic
Oh,
answer.
that wasn't the answer to the question.
Um, so now my wondering is, as a medical professional, you all are aware of the way that the brain develops.
Right.
And so for adolescent youth, the entire way that the prefrontal cortex isn't fully aligned, and so the hippocampus is more inflamed when the person experiences is stress, and so decision making isn't the greatest. Like, as medical professionals, and knowing this, what part does that question play in terms of residency if the person's decision making faculties aren't on point yet?
Sorry, say that. We'll say the question again.
So I understand that becoming a doctor, you looking at the whole person, right? You're not just looking
Right.
at the ability to know medicine and know science and be able to apply it, but also the type of character that the person has.
Yes. Yeah.
So in terms of character, knowing medically that there are certain things that a young person, they have difficulty with, like good decision making during moments of high stress. What
Okay.
part of the application process does that question play? Is it high? Is it low? I'm just trying to get an understanding, because as a field that doesn't know anything about medicine, right? So you're talking about maybe being a teacher. You want to know if the person in the classroom has any records, any previous, incidents that would make the school look bad. They would, is this a question that helps you determine if the person's going to be a good doctor or if they're going to bring trouble for the hospital?
From the time that this person, say said person that may have had that incident with driving, distracted driving, and then they see me, so that's 16. By the time they're thinking about residency, they would be about in their 20s, 25, 26. So if they're able to say, hey, this is an incident that happened when I was 16, whatever, I was distracted, I was trying to text my mom, or like there's always a scenario, and they feel like they're changed from that behavior, whatever, and they were able to show like their life, okay, they volunteered, they had good grades, they had good recommendations, that's something that you potentially want to give this person a chance, because they have to be insightful to say, what I did was wrong and that cost a life. If we're talking about that same scenario, have some remorse, but hey, this is like, but be able to demonstrate, them being a doctor. Maybe they wanted to be an ER physician because they could have like saved that person, like, I don't, or they could have did critical medicine. Like, hey, this was a turning point for me, that after this happened, I realized that I want to save lives in whatever capacity, or they want to be, like, I feel you kind of, I like to hear the story, but I have to kind of see like, are you the type of doctor that I would want to work with, and I want to see my own family? That's the way I see. Because any person that I train, I have to feel comfortable for, like, if I'm in the ER and I look up, I'm like, damn, man, no, wrong resident. I shouldn't, you don't want that to be it. Like, oh man, like, can I get somebody else? You want to be confident in like what you bring out, like kind of like almost like children, right? Like when your children grow up, you want to say like, all right, well done. Like God says, like, well done. So anyway, sorry, that kind of went off, but because there's definitely, maybe not to that extent of like that example you gave, Jory, but there's definitely students that I've interviewed, and they, whether they had scores that weren't the best, or they've had family trauma, domestic, people always have a story. So you have to hear the story and see like, okay, you know, how would they be as a, you know, some people, you know, how would they be as a physician, and what from their story can actually make them even a better physician. Because what if that person works in the correctional medicine, right? That person who happened, they like, wow, God saved me from like being in jail. I want to work with youth. And because there's correctional medicine, there's doctors who legit work at Rikers. You know, like there's always a place for some, you know, there's always a place for someone. Maybe that person's like, you know, I want to work in the correctional facility and, you know, take care of, you know, minors, like at that point that I could have been here, but I'm not. Let me give back in that way. And that story would impact me. I'm like, okay, like you're in there for the right reasons. So you kind of have to take it as each individual. I see. Everybody is different, so to speak, and that's why you sort of look at the application, you interview them, and you talk, and you're like, oh, like you always hear so many crazy stories just being in my position, because people, you know, they open up to you and just say like, hey, this is what happened in my life, type thing.
Interesting. So more, it sounds as though more weight is given to a person's story in terms of residency and hiring.
Okay, so yes and no. It depends on the program director and it depends on the specialty. Some specialties, you know, depending on the specialty and depending on like who's running that particular program, some of them really put a lot of eggs in their basket for like scores, like for exam scores. So that's like one thing. So you kind of have to like look at holistically, you look at everything. Because for me, if I see someone with like very high exam scores, but they're not personable, like they wouldn't be able to engage with the patient, I may be like, I don't know. So it kind of depends. And then if there's something during residency that I can help, like, okay, like this is you, then in residency, I can train you in certain things. Like maybe you're not good at this. Okay, but we can give you the skills to be able to achieve that before you leave. And there's some things that you can't. You know, there's some things, you know how it is. There's some things you can teach and people can grow. And there's other things where you're just like, you may not be a good fit here. And, you know, that's just the way it is. So you have to have that discernment.
So this sounds, I think this is wonderful. I'm encouraged greatly. And I want to share that approach is not always the one taken once an individual discloses that they've had some sort of run-in with the law, even as a juvenile.
It's true. That is true, yeah.
So I'm super encouraged that, at least in the medical field, that there is so much foresight, right? Things are taken into account that unfortunately in other industries, it's not. Once you disclose that you have a record, point blank, period, we're done. That's it. There's no opportunity to plead your case. You're not even getting a call back. We're done. And so I'm very encouraged to learn that, at least in medicine, because you do understand, right, the idea of brain development and people who maybe they have some sort of impairment that maybe no one picked up on, but through working with them and mentoring them and having a relationship with them, you're able to kind of pick up on some of those things, and then make decisions based off of the whole person, not just maybe mistakes from their past.
Yeah.
I have a question. Is that a trait you see in a lot of doctors that you work with, or is that a trait that you see very minimal of?
Like what trait?
As far as like examining a person for who they are and not putting them in a box because they have this stigma on them, like, oh, you've done time, so you definitely can't do anything here.
Because they've been marked, basically.
Right. Do you find that more doctors are like you, where they look at what they are doing going forward, or do you find that a lot of doctors judge them because of their past?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think in medicine, there's still a lot of judgment, and it's still a very difficult field to get into. I think now, like, Jory mentioned earlier, like what was in the past. I think now that people are kind of looking at like the bigger picture, like, okay, doctors are more than just scores or the type of school they went to, or, it depends on like the type of volunteer work they do, what people are saying about them, like their character, their resilience. So and it's not like, it's like, oh my goodness, like bounds. I think slowly now we're in 2023, a lot of things have happened in the last few years that's kind of pushing that a little bit forward now. So I think I do see a change where, some program directors, again, this is just for scores. So I think one program director from a different specialty said, I don't even look at their scores. I'm looking at, what they did and, how were they during their rotation? Like I might be looking at scores when like 10 years ago, people were like, what? Like you have to look at the scores. Cause like, how do you filter? There's so many people trying to get into medicine. How would you know the top tier ones from the, whatever. But now people are kind of like, let me hear your story. They're really about like the resilience, like how do you overcome adversity and life challenges? I don't have a lot of experience with like doctors who've had records or whatever. So I've not had that experience, but my experience is in more if they had some sort of, challenge or adversity in life that maybe they didn't, have the easy, like, okay, high school, college, medical school, I'm done. But some people had to do a gap year. Some people had children, death, different stressors that they were still able to overcome and like make it, but maybe not in the straight line as like other people have made it. So I think we're a little bit more cognizant of that, and we're aware of that and realizing that could be a strength versus like a weakness.
I love it. Coming from a strength-based perspective. I love it. So good. Well,
yeah. So
Dr. Joyce, thank you so much. This has been absolutely insightful. Absolutely insightful. We are still conversing about being marked versus being mocked. And unfortunately, as you said, it is still a progression that we're seeing where people aren't just looking at what's on paper, but they're actually looking at themselves. And so I'm encouraged to know that at least the medical field is doing its part to examine the person as a whole, look at their character, look at their ability to actually be good at the job before you totally shut them out from even having an opportunity to do the job because of their marks, right? Whether those be test scores or whether those be possible run-ins with the juvenile justice system. So thank you so much. This has been great. Super excited for everything
Thank you
that's
for
going to
having me, as
happen
always.
with your program over the next 2 years.
Yes.
Oh Lord, we
back
got
with
like
updates.
how many days? We have a countdown. I think 30 something days to July 1st. That's like the launch of the program, July 1st.
Listen,
we're counting down.
We're gonna count down over here as well. We're excited for you and the trend that you're setting and the next generation of doctors who are going to learn how to look at a human's character and judge them on the basis of that. I feel like this is like a Dr. King special. By the content of the character and not by
it's true. It's true. Yeah.
January is gonna make 6 months that your program would have been in session, but we calling you in December because January is too far away. You will be, Jory, you better at keeping calendars than I am. Put it on the calendar. December. Call Dr. Joyce.
Yeah. We need a lot of prayers, well wishes. It's a lot of hard work, but I think it'll be fruitful.
Absolutely. So we're excited about the impact that you're making in Delaware. Thank you so much again for your time. This has been 30 Minutes of Power, TOP, with your host, the co-author, Jory Robert, and our guest for this evening, Dr. Joyce Robert. Until next time, people, be an empowered person, using your power to empower others.
Thank you for tuning in to 30 Minutes of Power. We hope you found today's episode informative and inspiring. To stay connected with us and continue the conversation, follow us on Instagram at 30 Minutes of Power or email us at azironsharpensiron@gmail.com. Don't forget to visit our website at azisi.org to learn more about our mission and how you can get involved. Remember, your power can make a difference in the world. Let's be folks out there using our power to empower others.
30 minutes of power.